What is the most hurtful thing a medical professional has ever said to you? When I was in middle school until 10th grade, I would get violent nausea anytime I got hungry. It felt like my stomach was on fire, and I would miss a lot of school from feeling like shit, although I was a good student and wasn't falling behind in any way. After a lot of fighting with my mother, who accused me of exaggerating, she agrees to take me to a gastroenterologist to be checked out. Before agreeing to do an endoscopy, the gastro accused me of exaggerating because I was a teen girl, and that's just apparently what young women do. He suggested I was just making up these symptoms for attention, and then asked me point blank if I was lying about my pain level to skip school, and suggested I had a mental health issue I was trying to cover for. I had fucking GERD and severe acid reflux. As confirmed by the endoscopy, he reluctantly agreed to perform on me. Instead of letting it go, the gastro made a point of angrily telling me that I had the stomach of a 80-year-old man and must have been intentionally eating in a way to fuck up my stomach. I have a family history of stomach problems and GERD. I don't understand why it was so implausible that my brother could have acid reflux at a young age, but I must be a hysterical liar when I claim to have the same symptoms in my teens. Wife took our 2-year daughter to the doctor because she was sick and her behavior seemed to be changing. She couldn't eat or drink. Our local doctor said that's how kids are sometimes and just monitor her behavior. As we were pretty sure there was something definitely wrong, we kept seeing different doctors. Last one said we were acting hysterically and our behavior were a problem. 5 days later our daughter seemed to have a seizure, so we went to the hospital. Our daughter had a brain tumor and the doctor at the hospital said this should have been recognized sooner. He was astounded that we've seen 5 doctors all blaming us as parents to just be acting up over nothing. I'm sure it's not that bad. The intake nurse of the inpatient psychiatric unit I was checking myself into after a suicide attempt following a sexual assault. ETA. Thank you to folks who commented or PM'd me. I am okay. I did a short stay at inpatient and everyone else who worked there, and, honestly and maybe more significantly, everyone else who was also staying there, was kind, thoughtful, helpful, and seemed to be much better at their jobs. This was about 2 years ago now. Things are better but not perfect. I think that sometimes that is hard, especially for people who are in my life. They seem to be waiting for a version of me that is perfectly fine, and I am not sure she exists anymore. But it is better than it was, most of the time. Sometimes it is harder, or at least similar, but I am still here, and sometimes being still here is okay. Being the only success of the day. I have my work. I have my son. I have my circle of people who really stuck by me, and that's a lot to hold on to. I had gained a lot of weight around my midsection a few years back, and my periods stopped. I was scared, young, and thought I was pregnant, but the tests came back negative. I went to a doctor to have myself checked out, and she did some basic tests before telling me, "There is nothing wrong with you, you're just fat." I already had some body confidence issues, but hearing it from my doctor, when I was trying really hard to get in shape, really hurt. I worked hard to lose weight, but my belly wouldn't shrink. I was starting to feel really sick, and went back to the doctor, who again told me it was that I was just fat. I was crushed. A year later I went to the hospital for something unrelated, and it was discovered that I had a giant ovarian cyst, about the size of a newborn. It was throwing off my hormones, making me gain weight, among many other issues. I have since lost weight and I'm feeling super confident now, but that doctor really messed me up for a long time. Piggybacking with the hope that people will see this, my psych is an MD and said to me once, "Doctors hate being confronted with a problem they can't solve. If you feel like the doctor you see isn't giving you adequate care and consideration, you're entitled to a second opinion." ETA. It's my understanding that many insurances here in the US will cover a second opinion, as it's in their best interest to do so. It's less expensive to cover that than it is to pay out due to unnecessary surgery or something that wasn't caught by one doctor. If there's doubt about insurance coverage, call the carrier and ask. Thanks for the silver anon. My mother and grandfather were both injured in the army. They will do everything in their power to claim that you are healthy, because if you are injured they pay your medical bills for life. They tried to tell grandpa that losing all of his teeth and having a crack down his forehead did not qualify him for a Purple Heart. Edit. Insert cringy surprise at how this blew up here. Story. Grandpa was in a tank, and a tank shell bounced off his turret and slammed his head into the other side of the turret. The reason they did not want to recognize his injuries is because he pulled the teeth out himself. They were loose, and refused treatment on the skull fracture. I woke up in the hospital and heard a nurse running out saying he's awake. The doctor comes into the room and tells me to move my toes. I ask them where I am and what's going on. He just gets more insistent that I move your toes. I asked again where I was and that was going on. He almost yells at me, move your toes. I said I am moving my toes, and immediately he says you will never walk again. That's how I found out I was a paraplegic at 21 years old. I had been in a single car wreck and was thrown 70-80 feet from the car and my vertebrae was dislocated and laying next to another one. I don't remember the car wreck, but that exchange with the doctor is burned into my brain. And that was 31 years ago. Edit 1. Damn, this blew up. Thank you to you all for your comments. I had a seatbelt on but went off a small hill next to the interstate after clipping an end of the guardrail. Flipped the car down the hill and seatbelt gave way under the pressure and I went out the driver door window. My back collapsed around the door sill and dislocated one vertebra next to the one below it. I'm a big guy, 6 feet 4 inches and 235 at the time, and the force was too much for the seat structure. I found out all these details over the next few weeks while I was in rehab. Edit 2. Gold and silver, thank you. Didn't think this story would touch as many as it has. I did a video chat service to talk to a doctor for 15 minutes. I told her my symptoms and thoughts since we were low on time. I had been very sick for weeks. Possible urinary tract infection and respiratory infection. Also gave my other ideas from my symptoms. She told me I had valley fever and told me all about it over chat, and we got cut off at 15 minutes. I got a final email which should have a prescription in it and was told she actually thought I had somatic symptom disorder, aka that I was making all of this up and was perfectly fine. Her prescription was for a fucking psychologist. She told me in detail about my possible valley fever even though I said I hadn't been to the areas she said it was prevalent. I made an appointment with my normal doctor and had a few tests ran. Had a respiratory infection and a freaking kidney infection, 10 or so days of meds and I was fine. My gosh, I was so angry at that quack. Wasn't said to me, but someone I knew. I work at a hospital, so does my mother. We had a 43-year-old woman who had a very rare form of cancer that spread incredibly fast to just about everywhere in her body. From diagnosis to death was about 12 weeks. The medications and therapies and the general lack of mobility caused her to become swollen and obese. She was a terribly sweet lady. They took her down to radiology for a scan and the technician made a bunch of really mean comments about her weight because she was too large for our machines, so they had to arrange for a transfer to another hospital for her scans and then have her transferred back. The technician thought that because Miss Jeannie was dying and sick that she was deaf or didn't understand English any longer, and so while they were alone she made so many mean comments. Miss Jeannie waited until she was back in her room waiting for her transfer before she started crying. I'll never understand people who feel the need to make others feel less than or badly. Edit. I don't know the whole story about this lady, just the few weeks I knew her when she was with us in hospital. I've seen pictures of her from as late as 6 months pre-diagnosis and she was just slightly above average in height and weight. I imagine the inability to move and take care of herself contributed to her weight gain. But, since I'm not a doctor, I can't make any kind of diagnosis beyond my limited scope of time with her. And no, the tech still works for us, and is a woman. 2 years of fertility treatments. We finally got the wife knocked up. Just before the 12-week mark they found something. The something was an encephaly. Not knowing what it was, we kept asking doctors what this meant and got very Dr. Y answers. The prognosis isn't good or it presents significant challenges to the fetus, all of which made it sound bad, but somehow manageable. As we continued through the gambit of doctors, we eventually ended up with one who had that declarative Scandinavian accent. When we asked him what does this mean for the child, he answered, "This condition is incompatible with life. If it survives to birth, it will live only for days." It was at once soul crushing and a relief. We finally knew how bad it was. but we knew what we had to do. The decision was no longer ours, and while it hurt, the clarity was welcome. Recalling this story many years later still makes me feel emotional. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm only 16, so I hope you didn't cringe from the editing. I hope we can get to 50,000 subscribers because I wouldn't be here without all of you. So thank you so much for your time and energy, and please subscribe.